Glory to God.
Amen. Okay, Sam, you may be seated. And Sam.
Cheers, Tim. Yeah, everyone. All right. I don't know if you were here last week, but we can get rid of that for a while for now. It doesn't really, not going to get to that for a little bit. I don't know if you were here last week, you heard Wayne Davies give his talk. He was talking about serving. It was a great message and I was inspired by it. And so this is kind of like Wayne's Talk 2.0. Hopefully you see a bit of a flow on, or at the very least, hopefully I can tie it back to it. If I butcher it, don't let Wayne's sort of preaching diminish in your estimation, but hopefully we can make a connection. What I wanted to, I guess, the sort of, if you want a title, the question in my mind as I put these thoughts together was, why go to church? What's the point? Or like to expand on that, do I really have to go? Why should I bother almost? Like what is the value in going to church? Can't I kind of just do it on my own sort of thing? It's a kind of question that you can definitely ask yourself. You can ask yourself when you're here. Sometimes you might have a bad day or sort of a long, boring talk that you think goes nowhere, and you're like, what am I doing here? Like, why am I coming to this sort of thing? You might be on your couch like before you go to the meeting thinking, why am I going to go today? Like, can I be bothered? Even if you're not in a negative frame of mind, it is good to ask yourself from time to time, why am I going to church? What is the value in it? What am I trying to sort of produce? Or like, what's the effect I'm trying to have in going to church? Because if you haven't got a good answer for yourself, it's a kind of brittle kind of conclusion that you've come to. Your existence here is kind of brittle and just a bit shallow. It's good to have an answer. It's good to have a firm, like, this is why I'm going to this building 2-3 times a week, sometimes for some of us. And this is what I'm getting out of it, and this is what I'm hoping to put into it. They're good answers to have. There's this TED talk that's like kind of really common in like work, management sort of circles. And I saw it a few years ago, and it's interesting, I guess, but like basically the guy is saying every organisation, just think schools, hospitals, shops, whatever, they can usually tell you, or staff in their kind of enterprise can usually tell you what they do. Teachers can tell you, at this place we teach people. The doctors or nurses at a hospital tell you, at this place we fix people up. We sell tyres, we do whatever. But often, he's saying, people in a company, they don't understand maybe the broader purpose behind it, like the why, he calls it. Why do we do this? Why do we do that? What's the purpose? And he's talking from a business management kind of perspective, but he says if you can get your staff to know the why, to really understand the point of what they're doing, actually your business will take off. Things will go much, much better because you don't need a sort of set of rules after that point. You're relying on good people with smart, capable people, understanding the broad purpose, and then them kind of taking their path to getting you there. And he said the organisation is going to be far more successful. And at risk of trying to butcher a kind of management metaphor onto the church, because it's totally different obviously, but I think there are some similarities in the sense that we all know what we do here quite well. In fact, some of us have grown up here coming to 2 meetings a week, 3 meetings a week for 40 years. We know all too well what happens. You could sort of recite the order of things on the back of your head, on the back of your hand, or to the point it can become a little bit like just a tradition, something you do by rote without even really thinking about it. We know the what, but do we know the why? Do we understand really what is the purpose in coming together like this? What is the purpose for us as individuals, and what is the purpose? What is the point as a big group? Like, what are we trying to achieve? And the sort of the point of all that was that this clip the YouTube clip is, and it goes for us as well, I guess, if we know what our purpose is, if we know overall, big picture, what we're trying to create, then the what, like the little bits, the tiny bits, that just kind of falls into place. And in fact, there is no, as we'll kind of talk about today, there is no script or pattern, particularly from the Bible, to the way we do our we conduct ourselves here. There's a lot of free play, actually, and we can figure that out well if we know overall what's the point. So I've tried to, I'm going to go through a few scriptures, but I've tried to condense down into some sort of three main topics, three main sort of circles. So that's what I was talking about before. Like, if you know the why, if you understand that central aim, the kind of how we're going to go about it, and then the actual things, what we do to make it happen, that kind of falls into place. It's less important in a sense. This is my effort to move to the next slide. Ron, I'm not sure, but maybe you just need to go next for me. Thanks. So I think you can break the functions up of the church into three broad topics. This is not listed out of anywhere in the Bible. It's broken down, it's pulled together from some scriptures and some ideas, but you could come up with a different looking diagram probably, we all could. But as a kind of way of helping you to think about it, this is where I'm going to start. And we'll go to Luke in chapter 15 to kick off. Starting at the top, the right there. Home. Michael, in his testimony today, kind of took the words out of my mouth. He talked about, if you weren't here, he talked about coming back to his church after 7 years away and feeling like, as we hear many people talk about, feeling like they were coming home. Now, I know not everyone's got a fantastic, beautiful home life, but imagine like Brady Bunch home. Imagine an idealistic, fantastic family home. In that place, that is a place of warmth, love, security, like place where you're kind of loved, you're accepted no matter what. That's what the church should feel like. It is a home. It's supposed to be a home for us and for people who come in. It's a place where you can be comforted by other people, you have a sense of security, like these people are my people, and it's where you can be yourself. It should be where you can be yourself. And overall, it's a place where you're always, always welcome. Luke 15, probably won't go through the whole story just for time, but it's talking about the parable of the lost son. And if you want to read it, go read from 11 through to sort of 24. But you probably know the story. Essentially, a young guy, he makes a pretty silly mistake. He takes his inheritance early, goes away, thinks he'll make something of himself, wastes all his money, falls on hard times, and decides that he probably needs to return to a place that he knows is good for him. He's very worried that as coming back, he's going to be judged harshly. He kind of actually says, look, I should just be put down low below the servants. But his father, welcoming back, says, no, it's all good, son. Put on a robe, put on a ring, have a meal. And it's like there's no thought that of what his past is. And so, to a large extent, our church has to mimic that. The home element of it has to be a place where no matter what your story, no matter what you've done, whatever your past, whatever your mistakes, you can come back at any point to that place of comfort and security. A top circle, it should also be, I think, a hospital to some extent. A hospital, obviously, is where people are physically repaired and restored, they're looked after. Go and have just to Mark in chapter 2, if you can. In Isaiah chapter 61, it talks about, it says the Lord was sent to bind up the brokenhearted. So, this place is a hospital not in the sense of healing us physically, obviously, but it's about healing and fixing up our hearts. God ultimately does that, but it's through often this vehicle. And in Mark 2 and verse 15, it says, and it came to pass, as Jesus sat at meat in his house, many publicans and sinners sat also together with Jesus and his disciples, for there were many, and they followed him. And when the scribes and the Pharisees saw him eat with publicans and sinners, they said to his disciples, "How is it that he eateth and drinketh with publicans and sinners?" When Jesus heard it, he said unto them, "They that are whole have no need of the physician, but they that are sick. I came not to call the righteous, but the sinners to repentance." Now, if you front up at Flinders on any given day of the year, it doesn't matter what you look like or how bad you smell or what you haven't failed to sort of achieve in your life. They'll let you in and they'll fix your bones or stop your bleeding or whatever they do. This place has to be the same. It has to be a place where whatever is wrong with people, however they look, in whatever state they present, we let this place be a hospital to fix them. Partly that's because we're all going to be sick from time to time as well. We're going to need the restorative power of the church and God, and we'll want the place to be like that for us. So it's got to be a hospital. And then lastly, it's got to be an embassy. I don't know, has anyone been to an Australian embassy in another country ever before? Yeah, one or two hands. I've been to a few. They're usually quite secure places, and they are like a little bit of Australia in whatever exotic part of the world you might be in, on a little sovereign bit of territory, and that embassy has two purposes. It's like a place of refuge in some respects. Like if you kind of get to your embassy in some countries, you're in Australian hands, and the local government actually, depending on exactly the protocol, but can't do anything about it. So it can be a place of refuge. But the places are also supposed to represent that country, their home country in that place. It's supposed to beacon out to the world. So for Australia's case, it's supposed to push out the values of Australia, what we proclaim, who we are as a people. And in a sense, I think that's what we need to be like as well. Just go back to Matthew chapter 5. Second Corinthians, typically the people who run an embassy is called an ambassador or a high commissioner or something, but we are talked about in the Bible as ambassadors of God's. And so if we are literally called ambassadors, then of course that means that the church is in part functions as an embassy and to sort of shine out something. Matthew 5 and verse 14, it says, "Ye are the light of the world. A city that is set on a hill cannot be hid. Neither do men light a candle and put it under a bushel, but on a candlestick, and it giveth light unto all that are in the house. Let your light so shine before men, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven." So as a way of thinking about the very the purpose of this group of people, the purpose of this church, hopefully we create an environment that's somewhere in the middle of that Venn diagram. That's what Woodcroft Church, by the kind of Bible examples, should be. How do we get there? It's good to have an overall sort of picture, I guess. But if I'm going to talk about going out the next level, then how are we going to do that? Where are we going to find our example? Actually, I won't come to that yet. Let's go to Acts chapter 2, please. I think if we're looking for a model of how we could do all those things, we're probably not well served necessarily by looking at other modern churches. It doesn't hurt to look at them, but we shouldn't necessarily be too drawn to them as a model. And actually, we shouldn't necessarily be too drawn to what other fellowships, other revival fellowships do around the country, around the world. Because that's not the model. We don't just model off what another group of humans are doing. Our model is the Bible. And so the best model we can sort of have to think, what's my involvement going to be like in the church? What's the dynamic I want amongst the group of people I'm involved with every day? You've got to go back to the Bible and then the first church of Acts. In just a couple of verses here, it gives some really, really good examples. Verse 42 of Acts 2. And the little subtitle in my Bible here is literally Practices of the Early Church. And they continued steadfastly in the apostles' doctrine and fellowship, and in breaking of bread and in prayers. And fear came upon every soul, and many wonders and signs were done by the apostles. And all that believed were together and had all things common, and sold their possessions and goods, and parted them to all men, as every man had need. And they, continuing daily with one accord in the temple, and breaking bread from house to house, did eat their meat with gladness and singleness of heart, praising God and having favour with all the people. And the Lord added to the church daily such as should be saved. To summarise that passage, I read about, I learn that things that we should see evident in our church today include teaching and learning, praying, breaking of bread, probably as part of a communion service like we do, but also actual sharing of meals. I read about actively building a sense of community and belonging. I read about a people who expect to see miracles occur inside their group. You read about a group of people who physically spend time with each other, and they also distribute to people in need. You read about them praising God, you read about them being a good testimony, and you read about the church growing, and it's specifically God adding to the church, the growth coming from God's work. And again, this is my diagram made up, so you can take it or leave it, and feel free to dismiss it. It's an effort, my effort to kind of try and put together, I guess, a few concepts. The scales at the top is because all these things are, I think, a balance. But I kind of, reading the New Testament and the book of Acts, I see like the three functions or three purposes or elements, I guess, of our church as being along that spectrum. On one hand, the outward focused, the external stuff, and on the other side, the internal, inward looking sort of side. If I take the evangelism sort of one on the left, that's all about the church's function as it is bringing other people to know God. That's got to be part of it, based on what we just read in Acts. If we go into the middle, it's probably where we're talking about our individual relationship with God, our direct sort of learning, us getting kind of corrected by God. The teaching bit, the reproof, the correction. And then the edification is more, I guess, how we kind of build each other up. The singing, the praising, the encouraging, that sort of thing. And the reason it's really important is for these to be in balance, and this is what our church strives for. You can see the oversight trying to keep this sense of balance of things, is because if it gets out of whack and any one of those three becomes too much of a focus of a church, you see some sort of toxic things occur. So if for instance on the very left-hand side, we're all about evangelism, we're all about just numbers, at the expense of that often is not a very deep level of teaching and people not really understanding much about their walk in the Lord. And so you don't want that massive skew. If it's all about, at the other end of the scale, people just about praise, just about worship, then actually maybe you never really grow all that much. There needs to be a degree of serious teaching and serious encouragement. We want also... if it's all about teaching and edification, then you can actually get a group where it becomes you get a bit of self-importance because we know everything about the Bible, and that can kind of create a bit of a sort of not a great atmosphere as well. It can become inward looking maybe and a bit stagnant. And so the kind of examples we see in the church, in the early church, like what our church is I guess done for many years and has to continue trying to sort of find is this nice balance amongst all these elements that we want to see. I need to finish up. So where will I go? Maybe just Romans 12. Try and finish there. The other, like the church, the success of the church, we read about growth, God adding to the church. It's not just measured in numbers on the seats. The room being full is one measure of success, but actually it's the individual growth in us all. That is a really important part of it as well. Romans 12 and verse 3. For I say that through the grace given unto me, to every man that is among you, not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think, but to think soberly, according as God has dealt to every man the measure of faith. For we have many members in one body, for as we have many members in one body, and all the members have not the same office, but we, being many, are one body in Christ, and everyone members one of another. Again, just for time, it goes on and talks about us having different gifts, and it talks about us trying to develop them. The gifts that we bring, our individual strengths, our individual talents, we've got to grow them. And the individual growth of us all over time is what grows the church, or it's an element of growing the church. So I guess just to sort of finish, if I'm going to tie it back to, the talk last week about how we serve each other, Wayne sort of talked about how it's got to be a really kind of, it's a key kind of learning that actually as you become more mature as a Christian, you realise the importance of serving your brothers and sisters. And if you think about it, I guess sometimes, why do you come to church? Why do you be involved in what's going on here? It's because sometimes you're going to need those bits. Sometimes you're going to need the hospital. Sometimes you're going to need the embassy, some sort of place of refuge. Sometimes you're going to just need to feel you're at home. And of course, that's when you want to come. But it's no good just staying away until you need something. The place has to be all those things all the time. And so you can only be, you can only help build those things by coming here and by reliably coming here. It's only through that you kind of even have the opportunity to start to kind of build the church into, what it is that we want it to be. And just reflecting on, the demographic here today, a lot of the, I'm generalising and hope you don't come across as too flippant or whatever, but so I'm 40 right now, so kind of middle-aged. If you're 20 now, in 20 years, I'll be at seniors camp. I won't be here. You'll be up here. It's kind of like it's you guys it'll be your church. Time moves on pretty quick, and you got to kind of grab it, like own it. Own what you want your church to be, particularly if you're a bit younger. You got time to invest in it. You got time to make it what you want it to be. It doesn't have to always look exactly like it's been in years gone past. It won't, because you all change, and we kind of reflect the society we're living within. But if we stick to some of those basic like Bible principles, what is this group of people supposed to be, and we draw our sort of sense of purpose from that, then everything else kind of follows. All right, Pete? It's good,